This is the story of my daughter's first word. It starts with a magazine on the kitchen table. The magazine arrived with a box of premium Canadian vinegars, and she would carry it around with her everywhere and look at the colorful food-related images. She opened it to one page in particular, over and over again, for months. The page contained a few drawings of pigeons. She pointed to them and said,
Dada.
What's that?
Dada.
and I thought she meant me. I was her first word. But I quickly learned that it had nothing to do with me. Dada meant bird. Until that moment, I rarely thought about dadas. They are always there, obviously, part of the background, like a park ride or a maple tree. The more my daughter said dada, the more I noticed how they're around all the time, yet I must pay attention to see them. Walking home from work, I discovered that there are building facades dedicated to dadas. And when I stopped to take in the spring sunlight, I found them mingling in the crooks of the streets. And roosting on silken clothing. Dadas even help express the core value of some 21st century businesses. There's an argument to be made that without dadas, there would be no airplanes. I wouldn't be able to sit in the steel belly of a winged giant, or bask in the unfiltered glory of sun rays. Dadas can show up when I least expect it. Watching some of the VHS tapes from my childhood, I discovered one where my mom hired a magician for my brother's 4th birthday.
Wow. No holding. Little birdies.
My backyard looks onto a field where geese love to fly. Every time my daughter hears them calling overhead, she runs to the door and says,
Dada.
As the months went by, her obsession with dadas grew. Dada stickers, Dada storybooks, Dada toys. With every new addition, I thought about them more and more too. Until my daughter, I rarely took the time to watch birds. Their world sidles up to mine, but it's discreet and hard to penetrate. So this month I tried birding. I had bought myself a fancy camera and lens to shoot one word, and I figured I could use it to capture some video of birds. Birding is a quiet, meditative hobby. I can tune out the digital world, the constant buzz of high frequencies, and experience unfettered lightness of feather and bird song. But with my kit, the dadas appeared distant. The experience convinced me that although dadas are everywhere, getting to know them isn't easy. They are the protagonists in their own stories, and don't have much time for interlopers. I began to feel as if I was forcing my way more and more into their domain. And it's not just me. Starting this summer, my township plans to build a massive residence community in the field behind my house, where the dadas love to fly. Even more concerning, the Greater Toronto Area has recently experienced a wave of bird flu.
A positive case of avian flu has been confirmed in a dead waterfowl in Brampton, and this comes as officials across the GTHA investigate the recent sudden deaths of hundreds of birds. First off, we'll start with whether or not the general public should be concerned, and how concerned should we be about these investigations and now a positive case here in the GTA?
There's always...
It's very hard to survive as a dada, and I fear for their safety. I also worry that my daughter will get sick from splashing in a contaminated puddle or picking up a rock off the ground. I worry for her all the time. It's this layer to my life that wasn't there before. She's so special it hurts. It's a miracle that something this beautiful and resilient and intelligent can exist in a world that's so often inhospitable. She defies my understanding and has forced me to rethink what is possible.
Go, Atlas! Go! Where's the dadas?
To better understand my daughter's love of birds, I called up an expert, and he was kind enough to let me visit his home in Peterborough.
Okay. Well, my name's Ken Morrison, and I became interested in birds when I was 5 or 6 years of age.
Ken Morrison has studied birds his whole life. He was a biologist for the Ministry of Natural Resources, and he's also an award-winning bird taxidermist and carver, and he runs a business out of his home called Feathers Alive. I was shocked at the depth of appreciation he has for birds, which is clearly shown in his collection. Beautiful. All right. This is incredible. In his home, there are over 130 mounts, and he has worked on hundreds more. Ontario has very strict laws around raptor taxidermy, which means the birds in Ken's collections died naturally or accidentally, and each mount Ken showed me during my tour had a story.
And that was a falconer's bird as well. The falconer had flown it at his home property, and he was swinging the lure to attract the bird back to his fist. And instead of coming into the lure like it had probably hundreds of times previously, it landed on a small building and started teetering and then dropped forward and hit the ground.
Aww.
And it died of a heart attack right then. I necropsied it later and the heart had ruptured. There's a story behind these two that were accidentally killed by a landowner, put poison out to kill a skunk or rat that was getting into his beehives. The raccoon wandered away from where he'd poisoned it and died, and both these hawks died from ingesting poisoned meat.
Oh, wow.
So I mounted them as a pair with the male presenting a spruce twig to the female to line the nest with in the spring.
Talking to Ken, I learned that DADAs have a tremendous power to inspire, shape, and give purpose to the world around me.
I consider birds an important part of my life, actually. I was involved in the peregrine falcon reintroduction programs in the early 80s, which was a very successful and very enjoyable aspect of my career.
And his passion and admiration for birds inspired his family, too. His wife paints birds, his son Kyle works as a biologist in the wildlife policy at the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. His grandchildren also love birds, and they paint birdhouses and other crafts on the weekend. And I've honestly never seen anything like it.
Yeah, that's pasture pigeon. That's used to be the most abundant bird in the world. Audubon estimated about 5 to 7 billion at one time in the early 1800s. In 1914, the last one died in the Cleveland Zoo. It was a female named Martha, and it died then. It was the last one.
What's the why?
Because of human greed, mainly, which is often the case. They were killed by the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, for the food market. They're salted down in barrels and sent back to New York and Philadelphia and so on. And they were so abundant that, they used to darken the sky for literally days, one flock flying by. That was my third carving.
Like, this is your third carving ever?
Yeah.
Visiting Ken's home was an experience I'll never forget. And at the middle of this multi-generational fascination is a father who loves birds. And it got me thinking about how there are a few times when my daughter points and says Dada, and there is no bird. Just a frumpy-looking bald man in a hat. And I wonder if her and I are figuring out Dada together. Maybe Dada means more than one thing. Just as with birds, fatherhood was an idea in the background, a thought soaring overhead. I've only had one experience with Dada's, my father, and if you've watched or read One Word before, you probably know my dad died when I was 19. So Dada for me has always been colored a roomy, tragic green. Even today, my daughter is 18 months old and I have a hard time seeing myself as a father. When I walk with her to the park or drive with her to the mall, how I feel is not how I imagine it would feel as a father. I'm just me, walking around with a little girl that I'm trying my hardest to protect. Raising a daughter is not unlike raising a little bird. She lives in this nest I've created with baby gates and extra cushions. And every day she gets a little more brave, testing the limitations of the world around her. She's growing so fast. Some days I wake up and she looks completely different. And one day I know she'll run to the door and fly away. Fatherhood is absurd. I will spend countless hours raising my daughter, and the goal of all this time and effort and heartache is that she must go out on her own into this harsh, often cold and sick world, alone. My God, what did I get myself into? Until I started exploring Dada's, fatherhood bewildered me. But I remembered something Ken said after the tape stopped rolling. It was this concept of fledging. So I called him up and asked him to explain it to me.
Hello, Dagan.
Hey, how are ya?
I'm well. When they're considered fledges, when they first leave the nest, I and several other people were involved in capturing Canada geese on the Toronto Islands. And we created up the juveniles, the young of the year, and before they could fly. The thinking is that the birds that where they learn to first fly, they'll come back to that general area and look for a nesting site when they're mature.
It's not easy teaching a little girl how to fly. Raising her takes everything, more than everything that I have to give. But as I raise her, she's teaching me how to grow past the loss of my father, so I can be her Dada. And I just want her to know that wherever she soars, across oceans, through strange lands, down paths of knowledge, towards new friends, and beyond anything I could even imagine, from my place fettered to this earth. I just want her to know I'll always be there when she's ready to come home.